Hey everyone, welcome to my new video. On a lot of my videos, when I read through comment section, and some of my DMs, a lot of you are asking about how I got my Blender setup, what shortcuts I use, and what add-ons I use. So I thought it'll be a great time to actually show you how I got my Blender setup, how I got set up my shortcuts and my add-ons. And I mostly try to keep things simple with Blender setup and my add-ons, so it's easier for you to follow. But some of these add-ons and shortcuts are just too good to be left on the table. So let's now jump right into it. And if you enjoy video like this, please leave a like, it will really help my channel. And if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more in the future, please hit that subscribe and additionally bell button if you want to get notified when I release something new. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender, and you want to become a 3D illustrator, go and check out my courses that are carefully designed to teach you beginner and intermediate skills in quickest and most effective way. For example, with the new Ultimate 3D bundle, you can go from simple cubic designs all the way to full character illustration in a matter of weeks. So if you're interested, please go check out the link in the description. And I'll start with the simple UI setup right now, because some of you might be using Blender on a laptop, some of you on the desktop, and there might be slight differences. I personally use Blender on desktop with keyboard. That means I have an access to full numpad on the right of the keyboard, so that makes things easier for me. And also I use a 3-button mouse. If you, for example, need to use Blender on a laptop with a touchpad, that changes things a little bit, but let me show you how you can remedy that. So if you go into the edit preferences and input section, you can actually find emulate numpad and emulate 3-button mouse options, and they do exactly what they say. If you check emulate 3-button mouse and emulate numpad, let me show you what that does. So before you would rotate your screen with the middle mouse button, if you don't have a 3-button mouse and you enable this emulation, you can now hold Alt key and just rotate with the left mouse button, and use all of these other navigation shortcuts. So you can hold Alt and Control, to zoom in and out, and hold Shift to move things around. And emulate numpad serves for easy view switching. So if you need to, look from top, right, left, before you would use numpad keys for that. Since you're on a laptop and you might not have it, with the emulate numpad key, you can use regular keys that are on the top of your keyboard. And if you press 1, you can look from the front. You can use 3 for a side view and 7 for a top view, same as with the numpad. Please keep in mind that you are losing a little bit of a functionality with this, because if you have an object here and you go into the edit mode, before you would use 1, 2, 3 keys for switching vertex, edge and face select. And right now, of course, you lose this option because with these keys you are switching viewports. So let me just go back and deactivate this. So that's just a side note. If you are not able to use 3-button mouse or a numpad, you can use these options right here. And another thing, a lot of times I get asked what these shortcuts on the right mean, especially some of them. So for example, I have this key and it shows here as GRLS. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but that's just the key that's next to my Z on the left on my keyboard. You might have it on your keyboard, you might not, but that doesn't really matter, because this is a purely custom key that I have mapped to show wireframe overlay. I will just subdivide this so we have some wireframe here. And right now, if you go here to the overlay settings, you can see there's a wireframe overlay that you can enable, and that basically will show the wireframe of your object. And that's a very useful thing when you need to check, your geometry density and stuff like that. But there is no default key assigned to it, and that's what I assign my GRLS key to. So if you right click here on the checkbox, you can change the shortcut to whatever you like. So basically just choose some key that you're not using with Blender. If you don't have that option, don't worry, you can also use the quick menu option. So just right click and you can add to your quick favorites. You can see I have removed from quick favorites because I have it already there. So if I go here, press Q for a quick menu, you can see I have this wireframe checkbox right there in my quick menu. So I have it on both places. I can use my key and I can use a quick menu as well. And speaking of quick menu, I have some other things there that I use quite frequently, and maybe it's a little bit harder for you to catch. So for example, when I press my Q, I have curve from mesh and mesh from curve. there are two options that I use quite often. Of course, you can use the right click convert to, but sometimes it's just easier to press Q and choose from these options. And again, you can just right click and add or remove from your quick favorites whatever you see on your UI, in your menus, whatever you see and you use frequently, just add to your Q menu. And when you see me pressing Q and choosing from this list, you will know that I added that manually. So I will just mention two more things that I use like this. For example, when you go object relations and make single user, that's quite handful to do, and that's the thing that I use quite often when I have linked data, when I have linked duplicates or linked animation and I need to separate either animation or object data. I just go here, press Q and choose object data or object animation if I want to separate the data from the linked object. And the next thing, when you press N and you go to the view, you can see there's camera to view option, and that's basically enabling you when I, for example, right now add camera and press Ctrl-Alt-0. Right now, if I disable this, I can just rotate my screen like this, nothing happens. But if you enable that option, you are able to move your camera with your standard viewport controls. That's really useful when you intuitively need to place your camera and adjust your view. And then you need to, of course, disable it when you want to return to your standard viewport controls. And I have this mapped on my Q menu as well. So you can see lock camera to view option here. Again, easily accessible through the quick menu. And as I was talking about this key next to the Z, let's talk about the Z key a little bit, because that's what I use to, switch through different view modes. And sometimes you might not have all of these options there because this is not a default settings. So let me show you what I mean by that. If you go into the edit preferences and you go to a key map preferences, you will see there's extra shading pie menu items, and you can see I have it checked on. So if you disable this and press Z, you can only see 4 basic view modes, same as here. And if you enable this option, you can see 2 more options, and that's toggle overlays and toggle X-ray. And these are very useful. So toggle X-ray make you see through your mesh, which is very handy when you need to select everything, even the things in the back. So I use this quite extensively. And toggle overlays basically disables everything and makes your viewport clean and easy to look at. So you remove all the clutter, all the gizmos, and basically every unnecessary line in your viewport. So these are 2 options that I use here, and that's why I have my wireframe overlay key next to Z, because it's closely related to that functionality. So that's about my UI setup and some keyboard shortcuts and stuff. And let's move to add-ons. There are several add-ons that I use, and these are considered quite essential, and at this point I can't imagine using Blender without them, because they make things so simple. And at the same time, they're not adding too much functionality, so this is still considered like vanilla Blender, but only makes some things easier. So first thing, let's go to the edit preferences and add-ons, and you might search for extra, and you can see 2 add-ons here: add curve extra objects and add mesh extra objects. All of the add-ons that I will show here are by default available here in Blender. They're just not activated, so the Blender is not so cluttered. So there's no need to download anything. You just go into these preferences and enable them, and right after you enable these 2 add-ons and you press Shift A, you will see all of these other options in your add mesh and all of these other options in add curve. If you don't have these add-on activated, you wouldn't see this here, and there are really useful things there. So for example, knots, you can have catenary knot in between 2 objects. Let me show you what I mean. You can have another cube here. You can select these 2, press Shift A, and let's add curve. And you can see right now you have this option to have like the hanging cable between 2 objects. So quite a useful add-on for the curves. And for example, if you go to mesh, you can have a lot of different objects here. For example, single vert is a thing that I use quite often when I need to just extrude one single vertex. I don't need to merge vertices from another primitive. I just add single vert, and then just start extruding that or anything. So that I use quite often, and quite often I saw you asking in the comments where this functionality comes from. And as well as round cube, let me delete this. That's something that I use quite often with the quad sphere preset, where you have this nice sphere made out of quads. So again, very useful add-ons, extra objects. Go ahead and activate it. Now I'll go to the preferences again, and let's search for curve, because there is one thing I use quite often, and that's simplify curves. So for example, when you have a green pencil object here and you go into the draw mode and draw something, you have an option there in the object mode to convert this to curve. Let's say polygon curve. And now let me delete the grease pencil, and we have this curve here, but it's quite dense and I like to simplify things so it's maybe easily manipulated later or something. So you can just select it, press Shift A and add a new curve with curve simplify, and basically increase the error, and you can see how this curve is getting chopped into less and less control points. So you can have something like this here, and the original is still in place. You need to delete that, and you have this new curve that's simplified, and you can, for example, use subdivision modifier there, but you have now easy control over this curve, without so many control points. So that's quite handy to use. And then probably one of the most essential tools, the loop tools. So again, edit preferences, add-ons, and you search for loop, and you can see the loop tools add-on right here. And if I, for example, now add a cube, go into the edit mode, subdivide. Let's say I want to create a hole here or something, so I can select these 4 faces and right click, and you can see the loop tools options right there. There are several of them. You can of course go ahead and research what the other options do, but mostly I use the circle. So if you click, they will basically change this into a circular shape, and it's very useful when you, for example, need to make a hole and then use your subdivision modifier or something to create shapes like this. And of course, another very useful add-on, again, let's go to the preferences and search for node, and you can see the node wrangler add-on here. If you expand this, you can see all the hotkeys here, what that actually adds to your node editor functionality. I use only few of them, but at this point I can't imagine my workflow without them. So let's go to the shading menu, and for example, I create a new material and I need to add texture. I will just press Ctrl T, and I have the whole texture setup right there with mapping, and I can choose whatever coordinates system I will use and choose my new texture. If you have a PBR textures, maps with color, with roughness, with normals and everything, you can select your principled shader and press Ctrl Shift T, and that will basically allow you to load up multiple textures. And let me, for example, navigate to something like I have here some metal, for example. You select all of these maps and do a principal texture setup, and basically you have all of these maps, your roughness, your metallic map, your normal map, in place with one click. So really essential add-on, the node wrangler. And then another important thing with the node wrangler, the preview node, when you, for example, need to see just the content of the color, you select the node and you can Ctrl Shift click the node, and that will link it to this like emission viewer, and you can see it on your object if you want to see metallic map, if you want to see roughness map, or basically any other node. So for example, when I press Shift A and let's add, for example, color ramp, I can press Ctrl Shift and click to preview the color ramp, how that would look like on my current object with my current mappings and stuff like that. So pretty cool. And if you use this preview, don't forget to always Ctrl Shift and click your principled shader so it connects back to your material output. Otherwise it would render like that. It's not like some temporary preview or something. It really creates the node setup that would be used for rendering. And the final thing I want to show you is Boolean add-on. So if you go to the preferences, add-ons again, and search for bool, there's a bool tool add-on. It doesn't do anything special like within the functionality of Blender. It just simplifies the steps for you. So for example, when you need to make a Boolean operation with 2 cubes, let me show you what I mean. When you need to, for example, subtract that, you can do this easily within the Blender with the Boolean modifier, just like this, and then choose the Boolean object. And you might get confused why nothing changed, why this is still here. And basically that's because it's just another object and it's used as the cutout section for your object, but it still can be rendered, it's still visible, it's still present in your scene. And if you don't want to see that, you need to change different settings. For example, you need to disable the rendering for that object so it's not visible in your final render. And then to make the scene look a little bit better, you might go to viewport display and choose, wireframe, and then you will see it actually works and it actually can do these things. But there are other things involved. For example, this object might still, create shadows around it or something. So to make sure you have everything set up correctly, let me delete this. You can just add a new object that you want to use as a bool object. Select the one you will be cutting with shift. So that's the one that's active in the yellow outline. And you can just press Ctrl and minus on a numpad, and that will create this Boolean operation for you. Everything is set up as before, but this object is already in wireframe, it's already disabled for rendering. And if you go to its options, you will see that for visibility, if you change these to cycles, for example, that there are a lot of rays that are disabled for this, and this is a safe Boolean object to use. It will not affect your scene whatsoever, other than the Boolean operation that you want it to do. So really great add-on. And of course there are other shortcuts. You can use Ctrl plus, that will add, So let me show you another one. For example, there's Ctrl asterisk that will create an intersection, and one that I like very much, Ctrl slash, and that will create the intersection but leave the cutout as well. It will basically create a link duplicate object, and both of them have Boolean modifiers, just with a different operation. And then it's easy. Then it's easy, to go and add, for example, a bevel modifier to this, and have something like that, which is still non-destructive. So bool tool, very useful add-on for Boolean operations. I don't use any advanced Boolean and hard surface add-ons. As I said, I like to keep things simple and easy for you to follow, but this one here, it would be really a waste of time to not use something like this. And the last thing I want to show you is the Isocam add-on. That's the add-on I found. But it's not maintained anymore, so I went ahead and did an update so it works with Blender 2.8 and higher up, and that's the Isocam add-on. You can go ahead and find the link in the description. That's the only one on this list that you need to download and install. You just go into the edit preferences again and click install button to load up the zip file you download. And then when you press N key for your side panel, you will have your Isocam options here, and you can, for example, choose to add true Isocam. That's the 4:3 ratio of the orthographic projection, or you can use game Isocam for little bit more Age of Empires style isometric look and stuff like that. Basically, only thing it does, it adds the camera and setups its angle, and the orthographic projection. But it's a quite handy tool to create isometric views without having a need to, position the camera yourself. So that's the add-ons I wanted to show you. That's basically all the setup and all the customization I use within the Blender. Of course, there are more add-ons that I use, mostly paid add-ons, but that's maybe for some other video or something. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this one, if you want to see more like this. And additionally, I really hope it will help you to follow my process videos and tutorials that I post weekly. You can go ahead and check out the link for all of my commentary videos playlist in the description. And if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave that like. And again, if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.